Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome back to the final classic album of the year 2020 that we're reviewing. I'll admit it, today might be a little cringe for you guys because this album is near and dear to me personally. I have a very personal connection with this album. I actually started listening to this band not that long after I stopped posting videos in high school, so it was definitely not the best point in my life when I started listening to this band, but they're just near and dear to me. Just a little bit of business to get out of the way before I move forward. So this is the last video I'm going to be recording in this location for a while. I'm going back to the location I was using previously, if you guys happen to remember that. Also, for 2021, I will still be uploading videos. I hope you guys are excited for that because they're going to be a little bit more uh, organized at this point. I have a plan for January, and then I have a plan for what I'm doing when I'm done with January, and then I have a couple little things here and there before the summer, and then I have a plan for pretty much all the way up until next year's done. Not all of it's planned out specifically, but I will slowly start to announce things. First thing in January, after the first week, I will be doing reviews for a specific genre that I'll basically be trying to give you guys a full genre review. And I know that sounds crazy, but they're kind of niche genres that just aren't covered that much. Or maybe they're a fad in a certain place in time. I'll explain a bit more on Twitter, but that's basically just what's happening ahead. So, what is this classic album that I'm going to be reviewing today? Well, it's a bit of an anomaly because it kind of fusions several different genres of rock. It's bits of alternative rock, little bits of emo, which was kind of alien to the group at the time, a heck of a lot of garage rock because of the lo-fi aesthetic, even a little bit of punk because of kind of the simple structures. This is the second full-length album by acclaimed and now panned alternative rock band Weezer. This is Pinkerton. Now, this album is really, really cool in concept. It was taken from the scraps of a really interesting concept album called Songs from the Black Hole, which was a song about a man called a black hole who went up into space and had a bunch of basically relationship issues with, I think, an alien girl, but I'm not entirely sure. But basically, after this album idea was scrapped, basically the scraps, and I do mean the scraps of this album, because there are some tracks that were completely lost in time. They were salvaged and placed in this album. And in the deluxe version of this album, you actually get some extra tracks. And before I actually talk any more about this album, there are some deluxe edition tracks that I so recommend that you guys check out. I Just Threw Out the Love of My Dreams is a great one, and Long Time Sunshine is always going to be one of my favorite Weezer tracks. In fact, that's probably their broadest track in terms of impact. I could actually give that to anyone from any background because Weezer gets panned a lot for kind of being a guys band and not even a manly guys band. I mean, there's the joke where they're the incel band, but this song over all of them kind of just says that there's a different way of thinking about it. It's a very broad song. It's definitely got one of the simplest instrumentals. It would have capped off any album perfectly, and it's one of the saddest, most relatable things I've ever heard in my life. Speaking of relatability, this album has it so much, and you guys are gonna hear me jam the word relatability today a whole lot, just because that is what the album is. It's relatable. Pinkerton is incredibly relatable. It talks a lot about River's struggles with being a rock star, which, I mean, of course, I'm not a rock star. I'm not even famous on YouTube, but there are little bits here and there that I do kind of get. It's kind of like when you reach the top, you didn't really ask for all this. There's also relationship issues in this whole thing, and just plenty of just guy related issues, and I'm sure the issues are translatable to other people as well, but I really hope that people can at least understand these issues, because if you do, you have an amazing listening experience with this album. Also, this album is lo-fi. I'm not going to mention that on any track after this point, but they're all lo-fi. This is some of the most garagey sounds ever, and the first Weezer album, the Blue Album, is as garage as it gets. That thing is so noisy, but this is actually even more lo-fi, where you got these like really distorted sounds in the background. You get a hit of feedback before a song even starts, and it's really kind of to elevate the honesty of this album, which is another word I'm going to jam a lot today, as well as the raw factor. None of this is filtered. A couple more things about this album I like to mention. One of the parts behind the concept of this album was that Rivers actually felt limited in sort of his his rock ideas from the Blue album, so he wanted to expand more, which was kind of the precursor to the concept album idea. Also, he went to Harvard, and a lot of these songs were written when he was at Harvard. This was when he was in his like mid 20s, so it was after the Blue album, and he wrote a lot of these songs about his current experiences at the time. And apparently some of the melodies he actually wrote in music classes. In fact, on some later songs he mentions just little hints about these classes. And one more thing about We Even Scratched the track list here, this album, a lot of you guys are gonna hate out there. A lot of people are going to hate. I know Anthony Fantano considers this like a huge step down from Blue album. I really don't think it's that much of a step down. I think it very carefully treads the line between cringe and brutal honesty, and it never steps off that line. I mean, there's probably a point where it slips into cringe just for a second, and that's probably the biggest flaw about the whole album, but the honesty does pull through. And sometimes I can actually understand as a writer, because I actually have written some stories at points where I include a bit of cringy moments on purpose, and I don't omit them, just to give it a little bit more of a raw factor, and just acknowledging that it was the situation. I can acknowledge that sometimes you even need the cringe. So anyways, let's get into the track list. It starts off with the track Tired of Sex, which was actually apparently the earliest track written for this album. So it opens up with actually this hit of feedback before it just sort of rips through. And then you get this really, really chuggy bass riff. And if there's anything I can give a compliment about this album as a whole in terms of maybe the mixing department, the bass tone is incredible. It's almost heavy metal with how punchy it is, and I love it. It's seriously impactful the whole time, and there's never a second where it lacks in energy, mostly because of the bass. There's this really drony guitar riff that's over the chorus that I just adore on this track, and it precedes the core riff of the song for sort of the break after the chorus, and you have Rivers just like yelping and screaming over the top, which is the most emo part about this album. You get sort of the scream emo side of this, and it gives it a bit of honesty that I just might not have been there before without it. This is a truly sad song, despite all the energy here. The lyrics are incredibly relatable. I think a lot of people out there can relate to these words, and if you can't, I mean, I don't know, I'm not you. But if you can't already, the song Tired of Sex is about Rivers being tired of sex, and it's not like, oh, I get so much, I'm tired of the whole process. It's just that it all feels meaningless. And it actually extends further, where he actually has explained where everything, all of his interactions with people, girls mainly, have just been so meaningless. He described how after shows he would have conversations with fans, but they would be about 30 seconds, and he'd have to say stuff like, and this is sort of quoting here, he'd say stuff like, "No, I don't want your underwear right now. I'm actually okay. I gotta go back on my tour bus." He'd say things like that. Apparently he'd have weird interactions with the fans, and I kind of get those weird interactions. It's surprisingly translated really well. To cap off what I have to say about the song, there's this guitar solo that's incredibly raw and noisy, as abrasive as it gets, and it's just amazing. The next song is Get You. Get You means get you, if there was any confusion, because for the longest time I didn't get that. The song follows some of the previous ideas from Tired of Sex, but it sort of alternates on them just a little bit. It's got this really nice opening, really buzzy guitar riff. It's about a character sort of professing their love in a really desperate plea to keep someone around, which is less awful and manipulative than it sounds, and any bit of manipulation that is here is kind of admitted, and it doesn't show the main character as a good guy, which the self-awareness here is critical, and it's biting. The outro is this crazy breakdown of sound, and it's a really nice just sort of release of emotion and tension, and it almost feels like the character's like, what have I done, through the instrumentals. So yeah, the song's crazy stuff. I love it. The next track is probably the most slowed down track so far in the track listing. And it starts off with this really angular guitar riff that's just sort of climbing up and down. And it's nice and slow paced, but it feels really awkward and in a good way. And the lyrics here are about how the main character is so desperate for love that he just stays with his current girlfriend, even though they don't relate that much. And honestly, he's very scared and potentially even a bit abused. In a few songs, I'd say this is really the essence of a nerd right here. I can definitely picture someone of a less higher social standing than they could be, where they've just been so desperate for this kind of thing that they just get so complacent and they just stick in a relationship like this. It's sad, and it's still relatable. I'm sure everyone out there has had a relationship that they just kind of kept holding on to for a bit too long. And now the last in this sort of very punchy and punky type songs on the first leg of the album, we get Why Bother, which almost kind of finishes the arc of this previous songs, where you got the guy who's tired of sex, so he looks for a girlfriend with Get You, and you can imply that maybe it even works. But then he gets this total breakdown within the relationship, and he realizes he's been so desperate for so long that he realizes it's just not working. And Why Bother seems to come later, and it's another truly sad track about the character just giving up searching, which is sad. And I'm sure you guys all know that out there. I'm sure a couple of you guys out there are in relationships that are really nice and really happy, and you can imagine what things would be like if you just gave up looking. I like the riffs here. It reminds me the most of Blue Album, more than any other track here. It paints the main character as a bit more cynical and, for lack of a better term, incel-y. Probably more than any track so far, the brutal honesty really shoves through, and it doesn't paint a pretty picture of the main character, which is another thing I could appreciate behind this album. It doesn't ever try to be pretty. It's just raw, it's just straight up. Reaching a different leg on the album, we reach the track Across the Sea, which is probably one of the more famous tracks on this album. It's about how Rivers got a letter of fan mail from a Japanese fan who lived in Japan that was apparently so amazingly beautiful that it made Rivers just fall in love with this fan he's never met because of just how lonely he was at the time. The piano noodle, accompanied by that sort of string instrumental at the beginning, is very beautiful, and then it has this sort of like guitar chord, where it could just be like acoustic or something. In most usages of that previous instrumental, it probably would have been followed by some cleaner guitar tone, but this is Pinkerton here. It's this super dirty, just strum. The song is a great change of pace. It feels more sectioned than any other song so far. It's a little bit more bass driven, and it's a little more rumbly than straight up punching you in the face. The guitars are a little bit more laid back too, which I can always appreciate, because this is, for lack of a better word so far, cute. This is a cute song for the most part. There's a couple bits where it's just like, that's a bit too much, Rivers, but I can appreciate it a lot. The guitar solo sounds like Rivers is just destroying his guitar. It's like the height of a punky type guitar solo. So thoroughly gripping. And then it reaches the bridge where it's this sort of toned back thing, where it's kind of like a character dive into basically Rivers at the time, where he's thinking about all the things that led him up to this point. And honestly, if you guys have ever heard anything about the term monk mode now, where a guy's just like, let me just shut off all emotions, it's him considering it here, and then he's just like, I don't know where to put all this anger. I love this song because it's really like a live character study. It's really amazing. But yeah, I will always love Across the Sea. Next we reach the track The Good Life, which in concept is probably the least relatable track on here, but it's very interesting. It's probably the most nerdy song on here. It's literally a track about how Rivers has just been ostracized and so alone, but this is less of a romantic thing. It's more of just a social scene thing. It's about how he had surgery on his leg because one leg was shorter than the other, so he got it elongated, and basically he was just in a ton of pain for a really long time, and he had to walk around with a cane and just constantly on painkillers, and the dude was an outcast basically. And I love this song a lot because is it the most consistent with the ideas before? Not entirely, and it's actually kind of a good thing. It really shows that this character is not a pretty one, not a one to follow. For lack of better terms, kind of a Scott Pilgrim type character where it's like you're supposed to relate, you're not supposed to follow. Because this track it's hypocritical is what it is. It's talking about how he wanted all these meaningful connections and all this, but after searching for it for so long, he's just been isolated. He has no connection after that. So this is about him wanting to get back into the party scene, just saying like, I need a rebound or something to just get me excited because nothing's been working. But he's an old man. He's walking with a cane. He's got a leg that's gone through surgery. He's on painkillers all the time, and he's way older than anyone else here. Anyways, the song kicks off with this super fat bass riff. It's just awesome. And at this point, you kind of notice you've reached definitely a more fun part of the album. It's a little more jangly. The main riff of the song, I think, precedes some of Weezer's best tracks in future albums, actually. And after sort of all this build up of sort of emo rage, the whole thing just breaks down, and you get the weepiest guitar solo, which if you think that's ugly, that's up to you. But honestly, I love it so much. It sounds almost like Rivers is like crying through his guitar. I love how it all rebuilds back up again with that bass riff. It's just a great touch. Next we reach one of my favorites, El Scorcho. And this is a nice sort of acoustic guitar opening riff, and it's just sort of climbing all over, and it's super weird. And then you're introduced to all these words, and you can honestly think that Rivers is drunk for these because they're just so bizarre. And I love this song because it's a very noisy, cute song about liking a girl, and I can relate it a lot to sort of thinking of that like nerdy connection with the girl where you're like, maybe you'll like this thing too. Except he actually is like looking at this girl and he's like, I know you like this thing like I do. And I'll admit it to you guys, there have been too many times where I've seen a girl, I'm like, whoa, you're into this thing? In love. So yeah, it's relatable, of course. Another nice thing about this is you get a really nice sense of like there's nothing to lose finally. This is as open as Rivers is. A lot of times he's been desperate, but it's been really focused. This is just like him just throwing himself at you, and it's really fun. This is, again, one of the cutest tracks on the album, along the lines of Across the Sea, but it's a little less creepy. Also, this is another case where I just love the lyrics because they're not necessarily overly complex metaphors. They're just little bits and references to things that you might not think relate that much, but it's just things of the time that you're like, oh yeah, you like this semi-underground, semi-cult thing. One of the main things is the reference to Green Day in this track, where he's like, you don't know Green Day? That's amazing. And man, as the most pretentious music person you probably ever met, I can relate to that too much. Maybe not Green Day nowadays, but it's man, it gives me a huge sense of relief knowing like, people have been like that. Next, you reach Pink Triangle. Pink Triangle is a song about Rivers basically falling in love with the girl who actually ends up being lesbian. Hilarious. Quick little note before I actually get into the whole track. Apparently, he found out later in life that the girl wasn't actually a lesbian. I think she was just being like an ally, and he just assumed she was a lesbian because he saw a pink triangle on her. The song has a really nice guitar and chime intro before the sort of more distorted guitar just crashes on through. In the distorted tone of the song, it actually felt a little bit black metal. I was like, wow, I could totally picture that on like a Talk album or something. In terms of Rivers singing, Rivers has never been the best singer, but this is probably the best track on the album if you're looking for that. Again, there's another guitar solo here, and it's as buzzy as it's been so far. I love how the guitar tones on mainly the solos have just been adding these noisy elements that have just been kind of feeling fresh every single time. Next, we reach probably the favorite track on the album for most. Probably me too, Falling For You. Starts off with this twinkly intro right before the guitars kick in again. Another nice little touch there. And I love this song because it feels almost like a sequel to El Scorcho. It's like if El Scorcho was maybe Rivers drank a little bit that night and he's just confessing all these things, and maybe he was just with her for way too long of a time to not say something that made it a little awkward. And the next day he's just like, hey, I got nothing to lose, but here's a slightly more focused version of that. And yeah, honestly, this might even be the cringiest track on the album, which is some of the references just being so off the walls weird. But the honesty here is less like just whatever, and it's more like, hey, I'm going to be honest to you. I love the metaphors here. They've got that same idea as I was talking about before. Also, the lyrics here are as good as they get on the album. Falling For You. It's a fan favorite for a reason. Absolutely great. And I know it's cliche to end on the emotional note for the album, but the thing is, this album has been emotional the whole time. So you think, what could possibly cap off the album? It's actually an acoustic guitar song with just Rivers up there called Butterfly. So if you guys don't know, Pinkerton as an album is named after the character Pinkerton, that's not his full name, but that's his last name, in the opera Madame Butterfly, which was one Rivers was very much obsessed with during, I think, the time of the tour for Blue Album. The song basically is a summary of Madame Butterfly from the perspective of a character very close to Pinkerton, but maybe just a little more sympathetic. Of course, I wouldn't know. I've not seen or heard much about Madame Butterfly, but just the main plot synopsis. If you don't know, the plot is about a World War II American soldier who I think stops in Japan for a while, and he meets a woman and falls in love with her and gets married to her and has a kid with her, and then he has to go back home. And when he does go back home, he never comes back. And this all leads up to the saddest Weezer track, at least on a traditional studio album. I still think Long Time Sunshine might be the saddest, but this one is just dismal. There's no hope in this one. I love that it summarizes Rivers's just ideas about this whole album here. A lot of it's about like lack of self-control, just an overwhelming amount of guilt, and a plethora of other emotions here. It's all just a really rough ride on this one. Honestly, it's a bit of a tearjerker if you listen closely. And I implore you guys that even if you don't listen to this whole album, just listen to Butterfly. I think it is the shortest track here, but it caps off the album very nicely. So, that is the album. Yeah, unapologetically cringe at points, and I think that's okay. I think that aesthetic is totally fine. Do I think it's the most high art album out there? No. And for that, that keeps it from being like a 10. But this unapologetic honesty and this crazy fusion of little micro genres into this totally new product, and just the way that it was just so forced into existence, and the fact that they got a quality product out of the scraps of an album is incredible. And I love how the little blips of backup vocals and how some parts are more drum driven or more bass driven really feels like a more unified project rather than Rivers just screaming from the top of a mountain about how he's sad. Other than maybe a little bit of cringe here and there, I would have liked a couple of these tracks to be a bit longer. I know there's a real punk edge to this album, but I would have just liked to be able to focus on the instrumentals just for another second or two. Pinkerton? More like tickled pink from how good it is. And you know, it's weird saying this for a few reasons, but I gotta say, this album is based and red-pilled. I love this thing, love it to death. Got a lot of good memories with it. Never gonna step out of my mind. It's just an absolute classic. And you guys totally check out the deluxe edition too. There are a couple sort of outtake tracks. Like there's a track that's just the piano noodles from Across the Sea, and if that's not your thing, I mean, go ahead and skip it. Really do whatever you want. It's your life. I don't really care. But there is so many good tracks to check out on the deluxe edition. Or I think there are a couple uploaded versions of the songs from the Black Hole sort of demos put together, which is mostly the Pinkerton tracks with a couple deluxe tracks and then a couple unmixed tracks, like Dude, We're Finally Landing. But yeah, it's a real treasure trove of good tracks. So yeah, that's about it. That's Weezer. Love them to death. So I hope you guys are having fun out there. I hope you guys enjoyed our little stay with that super bright light over there. If you guys enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. It'll help me out a whole lot. We reached 120 recently, and I could not be more thankful. You guys are the best audience in the world. All I don't know, 6 or 7 of you. Any of you my loyal viewers who just come back and watch my videos. I appreciate that so much. Even if it's maybe a album you don't know or you don't know if you'll like I know these have been pretty jarring genre switches, which was kind of the point. I'm trying to appeal to a bigger audience. I am trying to get views here, but these are albums I really enjoy, and I'm glad you guys are here to listen to them with me. And if not listen, just listen to me, yammer on about them. So thank you guys so much. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, anything to say at all, please consider giving a comment or following my social medias. My Twitter is pretty quiet right now. It's mainly just me tweeting little announcements here and there, or just stuff about new material like the new Playboi Carti album. But yeah, I'd appreciate you guys following me there. And that's about it. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys have been having a nice holiday season. Hope you guys are just managing well in these crazy times. And that's about it. So if you guys are having a good day out there, have a good one. See you next time.